this point. And now I will turn the meeting over to one of our hosts, Mr. John Good. Sir, you may begin.
Thank you, operator, and thanks to everyone who's taken time to join us for another Coffee with Quantum. I'm John Good, Director of Channel Marketing, and today we're going to hear from Mark Pastor, our Director of Archive Solutions, and Kieran Maloney, Product Marketing Manager. We're going to talk about Archive, how it's changed with new technologies, including cloud, that make it intelligent and easier to use. Just as a reminder, all phone lines are muted to minimize background noise. So if you have a question at any time today, you can type it in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen in the box titled Q&A, and please label it for all panelists. So at the end of today's presentation, we'll answer any questions. We'll talk about our current promotions, and then we'll do a drawing for 5 $25 Starbucks cards. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Pastor. Mark, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, John, and hello, everybody. Appreciate your time. As John mentioned, I've asked John and Kieran to just chime in with additional comments as we go through this slide, so hopefully we'll have it somewhat conversational. But today we're talking about Archive and really how Archive, best practices for Archive today are really evolving to take advantage of technologies that are now available that haven't been previously. When we talk about Archive, a lot of people are currently doing Archive, whether they think they are or not. Sometimes they're retaining data for a very, very long time, which is really what we mean by Archive. And a lot of times they want that data to continue to be accessible, and so they keep it online, they keep it on their active system, or they have to make the trade-off if they want to save cost in that storage and move it offline. And by doing that, they typically have to make the trade-off of giving up the immediate access to that content. So those are the very easy ways to do it, and we've got a lot of proof that a lot of our customers are doing that. A lot of companies want to keep their content online, and so they just continue to store it on primary storage, as we talked about, and so that ends up costing a lot more. And I think we're all starting to hear pains from our customers now in terms of the storage burden from a cost perspective is getting out of hand. But the reason that's happening is because they want to keep their data online and accessible. And a lot of companies, they just need to store content a lot of times for compliance purposes, or they do have to retain it for years, long periods of time. And so when they know that they're comfortable not having to access that data, that's a pretty easy choice to move that to offline storage. And so that's, what we call a full offline archive. And a lot of that is driven by some of the compliance requirements and things like that. They don't expect to have to get that data. But every company's got a blend of all those types of data. And what they're really looking for is how can I, provide to users the access to all of the content that they want, but at a cost that is affordable within the IT budget. And so there's a lot of technologies out there involved in the storage equation, from very, very high performance flash all the way to offline tape, and a whole bunch of options in between, including cloud storage and things like that. And in some companies I've talked to, they actually, have to create limits in terms of how much data they store, because they're reaching their budget, or the storage budget is just getting so large that they're not able to invest in some of the other projects that they want to invest in, giving us opportunity to sell additional things to those customers. And so typically they're sacrificing something. Users may become less productive because they can't have the access to everything they want, or they're just not getting the other services from the other investments that IT would like to make. So the real challenge, and I think the opportunity we'll talk about today, is how can we, within budget, provide all of the users the access, the active access to all of the content that they want, but maintain the budget. And so what we'll talk about is, how solutions can be in between the users and all of the various types of storage technologies that we talked about. How can we take advantage of the performance of flash, performance disk, or some of the, cost equations related to public cloud, you know, all the way down to online tape or even offline tape. How can we create an automated system that provides users a seamless way to get their data regardless of which technology it's on, so you get the balance of performance and cost? So we'll talk about the black box in a little bit. Before we do that, I mentioned cloud, and one of the things that is a really important thing that I think is kind of the key takeaways from this conversation is there's a lot of companies that have what we call a cloud mandate, or a lot of people are very, very interested in the cloud because they believe it may be the solution to all of their problems. And I think that started really, you know, in full swing a few years back. You know, a lot of exploration, a lot of companies are still just getting started in that. I think what we're seeing, and maybe you're seeing the same thing, is that it's not an all or nothing proposition. You know, cloud offers some benefits, but when people start to use it for everything, all of a sudden they recognize that there's some shortcomings as well. And so when people ask about the cloud, I think what's really important to help our customers understand is, yes, we can help them get to public cloud infrastructures, but don't forget that what's in those public cloud infrastructures is all of the same technology that we would talk about putting in their own infrastructure. You know, so, you know, flash, disk, tape, all of that exists in public cloud infrastructures as well. And so if we can make it just as easy to take advantage of those technologies on premise, maybe that's an even better solution than relying on a public cloud infrastructure. But having the choice is really the best. And so we'll talk about how some solutions can really provide that choice to our customers. So the next few slides, we will it's going to be a little bit product oriented because it's a good example of the types of solutions that can deliver the kind of ease of integration and capitalize on the different technologies that we talked about. So Quantum has a product that we launched almost a year ago called Artico. And Artico is basically a NAS appliance that has high-performance storage inside of it. So that provides, you know, the normal type of performance access, NAS access to data that the users are looking for active workflows. But Artico also has some very powerful policy capabilities so that users can set policies within Artico so that as certain criteria is met, typically things like how old is the data or in which shares is the data placed, Artico can automate the movement of that data over to some of the other tiers, which could be tape, they could be disk or object storage, they could be public cloud infrastructures. And Artico also has the full capability of leveraging all of those back-end tiers to be also a part of a data protection strategy. So now what users can do is they can take data that they want to keep accessible, they can move it to Artico with active NAS access, and that data is immediately protected on the other tiers according to user-defined policies. Over time, the data will get migrated off, but the user's method of accessing the data doesn't change. And so that's really a key part of the seamless integration. So the user behavior, the application behavior for accessing the data doesn't change, even though the data may have been migrated from one storage tier to another. So a really key and important tool so that users can now actually have a solution to get the kind of tuned archive solution that they're looking for. So just to give you a sense of what that looks like from a user perspective, kind of restates what I talked about. The users who are connected to the NAS front end of the Artico appliance, they basically see the NAS share. So their files are just represented as being there. And in many cases, their file may be on the active disk within the Artico appliance. It may be in a public cloud infrastructure. It may be on an object storage or in a tape library. They'll just see the same NAS presentation of their data. And so applications and users can just, request a file. And if it happens to be only on a tape copy on the back end, maybe they have to wait 30 seconds for that file to get retrieved as opposed to the immediate access if it was still sitting on the active NAS access. But typically, if it's an older file, that would be normal and expected from a user perspective. So that's kind of what we mean by a tiered archive. Just to give you a little bit more, and this is the last detailed piece of the product. So the Artico appliance, as I mentioned, is simple NAS access, so it integrates well. And this is all starting capabilities. It can handle something on the order of 1 billion files. It's got 33 terabytes of usable performance disk storage inside. A lot of key features. It leverages Quantum's StorNext technology inside, but you don't have to have a StorNext environment to take advantage of it because all of that is integrated inside the appliance. So again, we just present it as a NAS front end. And so a lot of the key features that would come along with that, like data integrity checking, active data movement. So we have HA appliance inside, and we can take advantage of each of the servers in the HA configuration to move data so you don't lose any performance. And take full advantage of all the CPU power that's inside the box. We have the ability to provide encryption and output to LTFS format tapes. And you can even vault tapes out of a tape library and still maintain awareness of those files in your namespace. So very, very powerful solution, easy to drop in and take advantage of the additional tiers on the back end.
Hey, Mark, just one of the things to clarify. So 33 terabytes is the starting capacity, and it scales up from there, correct?
Yeah, that's right. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you actually asked the question because another really important point to make here, that is talking about the active disk access inside the appliance. And a lot of times I've seen people get confused that they mean, oh, that means I can only have a 33 terabyte archive. And so, no, as an example, even you can upgrade the disk inside Artico, but that still does not represent the size of your archive. So even with a 33 terabyte disk, you can have petabytes of archive behind that. Because don't forget, what we're doing is we're migrating over time files off of the active disk. And a lot of that's driven by when that space on the active disk is needed. So your policies will say, during what time frame am I okay with data to migrate, but it won't really migrate until the space on disk is needed, and then files will migrate off to, like I said, public cloud, object storage, tape library, et cetera. So you could have, tens of petabytes of files behind Artico, even though you only have 33 terabytes of active access in Artico, and the users have full access to all of that tens of petabytes of content behind Artico just through the simple NAS interface. And so that's part of what we talk about when we say how can you provide access to all of your users' data for them, because they can have a simple tiered storage structure like this, front-ending all their data, and they get the cost benefit of being able to store all their stuff finally.
So Artico is almost like it's a gateway or almost like a cache to what could be a multi-petabyte archive behind it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the other thing, just to clarify, is when you have tape connected to an Artico, it's still a file-based access. So you click on that file in your screen just as you would, any other file that was residing on disk, and it pulls it off of tape. It looks like any other file.
That's right. And NAS front ends to tape haven't been around that long. It kind of started when LTFS came to market about 5 years ago. But this is really kind of the next step in the evolution of appliances that can really just give give users easy access to tape without having to rely on going through a backup application to take advantage of the great capabilities of tape. I mean, tape is very reliable, but it's also very, very cost effective, and so it's really nice to be able to have all of your data accessible the way you want it to be, but take advantage of the cost profile of tape in many cases. Okay, John, I'm going to change the slide now. Do you have any more questions?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. All right. Actually, this is a really good part of the discussion. We wanted to just share with you, several customer examples that we have of people that are implementing this kind of a tiered structure for archive, just to give you a sense of where the appeal is, what kind of problems our customers are solving, to help give you some ideas, where to hunt. And of course, we'll talk about that toward the end as well. So here's a major university. I actually think we actually have a pretty use case on this posted on our website. The conversation here, I believe, started at the university where IT was being driven by a genomics project, research project at a fairly large university. But what IT also understood is that they had a lot of other departments that were looking for a better way to provide an active online access of all of their archive content. So whereas it started with the genomics department, they had art, history, economics, music, et cetera, all these other departments were looking for an improved way of providing access to all of the data. And of course, IT had to figure out how to deliver that within budget. And so what they've ended up implementing is an Artico appliance, as we've talked about, with 2 tape libraries behind it. One is the active tape library, and the other one is an exact copy of that, but it's the offsite DR copy. And so Artico has the capability of creating multiple copies of files based on policies again. And so the users here are basically saying, you know, when a file comes in, and of course they can tune different policies to different departments and things like that, but I'll keep it simple. You know, easy policy says when a file comes in, make a copy to each of these 2 tape libraries, and then they're done. And so they've got you know, about 2.5 petabytes of space currently, you know, in their first instance of each of the libraries. And they can grow that archive to huge amounts, you know, just by growing the tape library without even having to grow Artico. What IT is telling their users to do is because they've got it set up in a departmental chargeback, and so they basically tell their customers, which is the departments in the university, you know, when you are done with your data or your project or whatever, you know, when it's time to move it off for you to save cost of storage, just drag and drop it over to this share, and they've given each department their own share on the NAS on the NAS connection, and so each department can take advantage of that, you know, as they want to, just by dragging and dropping the files or the folders or whatever over to the archive. So really great, perfect example, you know, of a customer that's taking advantage of the tiers of storage for a broad set of users. This is a smaller company. This is a law firm. They actually specialize in some pretty interesting stuff. Sports-oriented injury cases. They have a whole bunch of typical IT-oriented sort of content, file and print type of content, but they also have some, you know, imagery. They have some video content, and they can't keep affording to keep building up their primary storage, and so they definitely need a way to grow, but solve that problem in a way that they can afford. And so what they've implemented is Artico. What was really important, at least from the IT department's perspective at this law firm, is their users were sensitive to not wanting to know that the data sits in a different place. So the IT department did not want the user behavior to have to change when they access their data. And so there's tools out there, in this case like Rocket Archivio, which is an intelligent data moving application. So it can actually do data analysis and then based on criteria, move data from primary storage over to Artico as you know, its own archive tier, and then it'll stub the files. So the users basically keep going to the same place on primary to access their data, but it may have been stubbed off over to Artico by the Archivio software. And then from there, Artico will tier it as we've been talking about. So for a while, it may remain on high-performance disk, but as their data grows and ages, you know, some of the older stuff will migrate off to a tape library, and they'll send some of those tapes also off-site, you know, for DR retention. And you can imagine how this will grow, because the requirements in this law firm is, you know, many of their cases need to be retained for 68 years was the number that they gave us. So long-term retention required here, a smaller environment, but a perfect way to provide seamless access to the users of their users to the data, and take advantage of the tiered storage. This is another great example. There's a state highway administration department, one of our states, where they're doing a lot of infrastructure buildup, adding intelligent infrastructure. And so what they do is they have trucks with cameras on them going around, taking imagery of the highway system, throughout the state. And so they've got a ton of images, and they've needed to migrate to higher resolution images. I think at some point they'll also start to incorporate some, 3D and some video and things like that. And so they knew that they had to grow, they had to plan for growth, substantial growth in the next 12 to 24 months. And they also had bought some primary storage previously, lower cost primary storage, but the problem is it wasn't going to be able to scale the way they needed it to. And so they were looking for a solution that could, accommodate cost effectively a lot of data, but could also deliver scale as they grow, from hundreds of terabytes up to petabytes, and I expect much greater than that over time as well. So what they did is they implemented actually two Articos. One is a DR of the other, and Artico has the ability to actually copy files from one to the other. And then they took advantage of our object storage platform called Lattice, and you can see it depicted there as three towers with kind of that circle arrow there, and that's because Lattice takes advantage of erasure code technology. We could spend a whole other session talking about erasure code technology, but basically what it does is it'll spread every file across multiple locations, and so you could have a site go down and still have access to all of the files that are stored in the object storage environment. And so they really like that because not only does it scale extremely well, not only is it very durable and handles DR coverage, but it also provides fairly close to disk-like access because it is actually disk storage, over the network. So really much higher performance archive, but still offers a much lower cost per terabyte than primary storage does. And so that's how these guys have set up. I think we've got a couple more. City government. So this example is where there's actually, this is starting out mostly in a police records environment. There's actually a lot of surveillance information coming back in, but there's also a lot of case history. So it's kind of a combination of some image data plus, legal type of data like we talked about with the law firm. Similar size to what we talked about with the law firm. So they basically implemented a 33 terabyte Artico with a smaller, a mid-size i500 tape library behind it. And one of the copies they send off to tape, they send offline for DR retention. They expect to grow up to about a petabyte in about a 12-month period of time. They really like the capability that we can write out with LTFS format because they like the independence of that. Their users are just drag and dropping from a NAS share. I didn't mention it on the previous one, the state highway. They actually, users are doing some drag and drop, but they also have a web-based analysis program that they're using, and it can only speak to NAS targets, and so that's another reason they really liked Artico, because they can just point their web-based application to it also as a storage resource. So city government, and then the last one, this is an engineering firm. They develop medical devices. Fairly small environment, even though the company's pretty large. And so this is a very, very similar to a couple of ones, small like the one we just talked about. They leveraged Rocket Archivio also. I've talked about Rocket Archivio a couple times. There's actually several other data mover companies out there too. And so we're not locked into any particular one. I just want to make sure that's clear since I don't have any other examples here. But if you've got some data movers that you like, number one, we'd love to be aware of that, and we also, are comfortable that there's no reason that shouldn't work with Artico as well. So they set that up. They also were very, very sensitive. I think that's an important point to make. You will find environments where IT and the user community are very comfortable just dragging and dropping data to a new place when they know that they want to archive it or put it somewhere else for longer-term storage. They're done with their active projects. And then there's other environments like the law firm that I talked about and like this engineering firm here, where IT really felt that the users would not tolerate having their data be in a different place than they're used to it being. And so that's why they use utilities like Archivio to automate the movement and the stubbing of data so that the applications and the users don't really have to change their behavior while they take advantage of an archive like this.
Yeah, Mark, I'm just going to jump in before we go to this next one. I think as we've run through these different examples, something that just kind of came across to me, and it relates to what John was talking about earlier, where Artico is like a cache. As you see all these different use cases, you know, there's really only so much active content. We're talking about, you know, unstructured files, file-based access. There's typically only so much activity that's currently active going on, but yet there's all this content that's constantly being created or constantly needing to be retained. And what's really cool is that depending on, you know, the unique use case, the unique customer infrastructure, customers can leverage a very cost-effective long-term archive that is essentially infinitely scalable. I mean, in this picture here, you can either continue to grow the tape library, or you can take files and put them off-site and bring them back in if you need to. You could have a copy, instead of going off-site out of the tape, it could be, you know, out to a cloud storage. So the active component within the primary storage there, represented by the, you know, the EMC primary disk, and then there's the first active part of the archive that is sitting on resident disk as well. You know, that's going to meet the active demands of the customer, and then that inactive content, you know, just can continue to grow very cost effectively, as opposed to before, you know, that the first graph you said, where the choice was there's a hard cut between that primary storage and the archive, right? It's offline, it's difficult to get access to, it disrupts the user's normal job. And here they're able to continue to work, but that archive can just continue to scale, you know, effectively infinitely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is an opportunity for all of you, because now once you implement a structure like this with your customers, oh, you need to upgrade your storage. Okay, let's just add a little bit more to the back end. You know, there's not any big, you know, forklift upgrades or anything else needed once you get the infrastructure in place to be able to scale forever. So good add. Thanks, Kieran. By the way, you gave me an opportunity to read a question that came in, so I'm going to field it right here. So the question is, do the tape libraries need a backup application, as an example, Veritas, to function? And the answer, tried to clarify that earlier, is no, and that's one of the great beauties of a solution like this. Now, because, you know, Quantum tape libraries, of course, can be partitioned, so if a user has a backup application that they want to take advantage of the tape library, they can point that to a partition in the library. But then you can also have a partition in an existing library that Artico is working with, or more than one partition if you wanted to. And in this case, then the data would just be file data presented over the NAS to the users that Artico is writing directly to tape, and no backup application required for that. So it does provide a lot of independence of backup apps, which a lot of users have been looking for years. And so I think it's a great solution to that.
Yeah, just to add to that, Mark, you know, if the customer does not currently have an archive implementation, then by creating this first archive, they're going to reduce the amount of storage on their primary that needs to be backed up. So if they currently have a tape library that's in their backup infrastructure, you know, they don't necessarily have to purchase a new one, right? They can create the partition you talked about, and now leverage that existing investment in the tape as both in their backup stream as well as in their archive, as you just explained. So.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm going to reiterate another point because I want to make sure this is really clear as well. And the asker of that question clarified that they were asking as it related to the university use case. This university is one that you've all heard of, very prestigious, and the stuff that they're archiving is precious. It's really, really precious to them. And what we're talking about here, as Kieran just talked about, is moving data from primary storage to this other storage environment. So the only copy of this data is going into archive. And so it's really important, and it was extremely important for customers like this university to know that their data is going to be well protected. So not only do the back-end tiers behind Artico provide the scalability, which is what we've been talking about for the past few minutes, but it also provides an identical, if not even more robust, data protection infrastructure behind your archive so that your data is safe. And so, you know, that's also fairly new, because archive solutions of the past, there was always the problem, well, how do I protect my archive? You know, I know how to get it over to cheap storage, but then I just have to go ahead and implement the same data protection solution that I've been doing on primary, and I didn't really save much money. Well, in this case, you can, because policies can make multiple copies of your data. You can put some of those copies offline. You can put some of them in the cloud if you want. Take advantage of whatever technology you want for the redundancy to give you the protection that you're looking for.
And then just the other point, you know, in that university use case, it's protected, it's archived, but it's still accessible to the scientists, you know.
Exactly.
The science data that they were storing into the scientists themselves who need to get at that data over time. It's not locked away in a backup application or anything like that.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm just going to add on one more thing to what John just said, and that is that I don't know if it was obvious or not, but that retrieval of that copy is automated as well. So if, for example, the initial copy was sitting on disk and you had a backup copy on tape, and you go to retrieve that initial copy off of disk, and for some reason that file is corrupt, automatically Artico just goes and gets the secondary copy. So there's no IT involvement to go and get your restore copy, if you will.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually, you know, there's so much in here. When you get into a conversation with customers, there's a lot of great stuff to talk about, and so thanks. Those are all great ads. Okay, one of the things, and we've kind of talked about this in some previous sessions, but this is just a template. It's a TCO, or total cost of ownership template, and what we want to do is just make it easy for you to have a conversation with your customer to help them, you know, do a back-of-the-napkin estimate about, you know, what kind of cost savings might I see. And the thing I want to also reinforce with you folks is we're not necessarily, and I learned this a lot from doing this for a while, what we're not talking about really is telling the customer how to spend less money with you. What we're telling the customer is how to spend the money more properly with you. So in other words, they can actually buy more storage for the same budget, or if they reduce primary storage, they may be able to finally get to some other project with you that they've been looking to get to. And so you're adding a lot of value to the customers by telling them how to be a bit more efficient in how they do things, because now they can do more things, right? So just it's an opportunity and a great way for you to think about it for your own business. So we threw some numbers in here, and the simplicity of the model is that we've called out 6 line items. And you can have a pretty good conversation just by talking about those 6 items. You know, how much are you spending on primary storage today? And just ask them what they're spending. And if you're selling it to them, you already know, right? So here's your cost per terabyte for primary storage, and here's how much you're storing, and here's what you're paying for backup storage, and here's what you're paying for backup software. You know, and you can start, you know, either you know how much they're paying in total based on their total capacity, or you can calculate it on a per terabyte basis. You can do the math either way, and your DR. So the first 4 things are things that they're already doing today, most likely. And then when you implement an archive strategy, we can say, okay, instead of the 100 terabytes that you think are viable for archive, instead of storing that on primary, if instead you stored it on a solution like we just described, let's talk about how much you're going to spend on DR. Let's talk about if you need a data mover solution, that might be 0 if they're just going to drag and drop the data over, so that's more savings there. And how much are you going to spend on archive storage? And feel free to include the cost of Artico and any and all of the tiers that you're going to put behind Artico. And the math generally comes out extraordinarily favorable to the archive strategy. Because, by the way, we didn't say it here, but in most cases, I have never had a customer conversation where the amount of data they're going to archive is anything less than 50%. They're typically talking about 50 to 80% of their data is just static. It's sitting around, and they'd love to find a better way to store that. And so if you do all the math, you'll figure out how much more efficient they can be and give you more money to pursue other efforts with them. So, try to keep it simple, so take a look at that. Certainly we can help answer questions, walk you through that if you want. Oh, here's actually an example. We had a customer, so here's kind of a real life that doesn't lay it out in the same format, but customer has Enterprise Vault, is their current archive, and as a matter of fact, so this is a customer that already has thought about archive. They're using Enterprise Vault to archive their emails. And they kind of looked at their environment based on what they're spending for backup software, because even though they're using Enterprise Vault for the archive, to the point I made earlier, they still have to protect that data because that becomes the only copy of data. So they're just routing it back in to the normal primary storage and backup process again. So what they're really doing is they're improving their backup window, but they're really not saving a lot of cost. And so if instead of routing it back to primary, where it's going to get rebacked up again, which is what you see on the top half of the slide here, the bottom half of the slide says point Enterprise Vault to Artico instead of back to primary storage, you've got 33 terabytes of active disk there that your users are still going to be fully satisfied with access to their data because this user didn't actually have a whole lot more than 33 terabytes of disk needed. And if you want to put a tape library behind it for a protection copy or for growth, you can do that. And, they could save, 45% of the cost of archive by just routing and taking advantage of tiered storage, tiered NAS storage like what Artico can provide. So there's a kind of a real life example for you. All right. That's kind of the key the key content that we wanted to go through. So let's summarize a little bit. So some of the key takeaways. Anytime you've got users, and we're always telling our sales team, always follow the data if you can. Have that conversation with your customers. What are you doing with your data? Where does it start? Where does it move from there? How are you, storing it ultimately over time? How long do you keep it? And a lot of people are just hanging on to data on primary storage for a long, long time. And so they're not calling it archive, but that's what they're doing. And then, if you're talking to a customer that says, I need to have a conversation about the cloud, my CIO or CFO is saying, we've got to implement cloud technology, have that conversation. I didn't stress it that much, but, and I should have pointed this out on the previous slides that we're looking at that talked about product. But as I mentioned, Artico can go to the public cloud also. And so if they want to get to the cloud, it's not always easy to get to the cloud, so you might need an easy way to get access to a public cloud infrastructure. Artico can solve that problem. But Artico is also so easy to drop into an environment that you might be able to show a customer that says, look, what problem are you trying to solve with the cloud? Because we can give you even more cost-effective storage than what the cloud will do, because cloud's going to charge a lot typically to retrieve data. So if you really have an active archive, you're better off trying to implement it on-premise, because we're going to use all the same technologies the cloud guys are going to use. So you can kind of help your customers see that there's a way they can accomplish cloud in their own environment if that satisfies their users' needs potentially even better than what a public cloud might do. And then, and so hopefully you've kind of gathered from the discussion that, there really is a way to be able to scale storage affordably so that all users can have access to all of the data they want access to. Sales pitch, Quantum can help, in one of our closing slides. I will say a little plug for Quantum is that one of the things that's a bit unique about us is we actually have all those storage tiers. Not only do we have this gateway or this appliance called Artico with the intelligence of our own technology like StoreNext technology, but we also sell primary storage, object storage, public cloud solutions, tape storage. So, we have a great opportunity and ability to really provide a fully integrated solution. So hopefully you've got the YCell archive, pretty well down. Where to hunt? I think our examples gave you some great ideas. A lot of local government is great, universities are great, law firms, engineering firms, anywhere where they're using video. A lot of financial stuff. I didn't have a financial example. Actually, we closed a deal within the past month or two, I think, a fairly large financial institution actually, capturing a lot of real live online financial kind of data, and they needed a place to just store that stuff because later on they'll do analysis on it. And then they want to keep storing it forever. And so, finance has a lot of use cases as well for archive. We've got several hospitals that are implementing Artico to store medical records, X-ray data, that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty limitless list. Anybody that's got data that's got any size at all and who's holding on to it for a long time is a great, candidate. And Dan and Karen, please chime in if John and Karen, please chime in if I missed anything. Let's see, data-intensive use cases. So yeah, there's a lot of environments that are very, very rich with content. So we talked about the highway administration who's taking a lot of very high-resolution imagery, in a huge quantity. We've actually got a deal that we closed as well where they're actually driving around disk drives, capturing all kinds of diagnostic data about automobiles, and they need to offload that to do imagery. So there's all kinds of use cases that we're finding where there's machine-generated data or automated gathering of content, and anybody that's got that needs a place to store it, and they cannot afford to do it on the high-performance primary stuff.
Yeah, in particular, that one they were using for the self-driving car technology. They were using high-performance, disk storage. And now that they've switched to this solution, they're providing, I think it's capturing 4 to 11 petabytes of data, and now to scale, they can just buy more tapes.
Right.
And so
yeah, exactly.
That saved them. I think it saved them 80%.
Yep. Okay, and let's see. We've got some questions coming in too, so hopefully we may get some time for that. I think we're just going to wrap pretty quick here. So, hopefully you understand, we've talked about, the strategic value, what customers are looking for, what to listen for. One of the things that's not listed on this, I don't think it is a lot of times customers are saying, I've got a backup problem, right? We've been talking about that for a couple of years now, but that we're still hearing a lot of that. I just had a conversation with a customer that's got multiple locations in their geography, and their backup is just saturated, and so how can I fix that? And they think 80% of their data is just not changing. Well, move it to an archive, and that becomes a lot easier discussion with your customers when you can move it to what you want to call an active archive. We have an archive solution that will deliver your content, over an active NAS access and off a personal performance disk most of the time. Cloud mandates we talked about. I need to scale, so hopefully you understand how the solution can really help scale, get the infrastructure in. It should be easy because it's NAS integrated, and then just scale the back end from there. And one of the things, like the medical device company I talked about, what that customer told us is like, I've been waiting for years for this solution, but it just hasn't been there. The combination of affordability and ease of use or ease of integration. And so that's, I think things like Artico finally deliver an easy way to implement an archive. I think it's not a new concept, but it's been hard to do in the past. And so I think we finally have made a lot of strides toward making it easy to get there. So with that, John, I'll turn it over to you, and you can close out with the last couple slides here.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Mark. So we have lots of great tools and content available to you. Just go to Quantum Alliance and under Solutions, select Data Center Archive, and it'll put you right into our Campaign in a Box, where we have training, some training videos under What to Know. We have co-brandable emails and social media under the What to Do section, and then tons of great content under the What to Show section, including a short 2-minute video on Artico and our archive solution that's extremely simple and easy to understand. The case study for the university that we talked about is also in the Campaign in a Box. Lots of other great stuff, including our promotion flyer for Artico, and our current promotion is when your customer buys Artico, they'll get 20 terabytes of QCloud Vault, which is in Amazon Glacier. And to go along with that, if you bring Quantum on a meeting, an archive meeting, where a deal registration is done and approved, and Artico is part of that solution, or Lattice is part of that solution, you'll get $500 for that meeting. And then when you sell the solution, you'll get $200 to $500 in sales spiffs for all the components of that solution. Artico, tape library, Lattice, whatever it might be. Those are all stackable, and we pay you on each one of those. And then if you have some large accounts, we're looking for, half a petabyte to petabyte plus scale archives, and you need our help to go after those accounts. We have a prospecting campaign that we can roll out with you. So just reach out to your regional channel manager, and we can work with you on those opportunities. Just to let you know, there are other promotions going on for our other products. So on our Excelis product, there's a competitive trade-up program where you can get to up to $8,000 off. We have a 3-2-1 protection with Veeam promotion, which when you sell a DXI, your customer gets a free Scalar i40. Up to $20,000 off on our QXS hybrid storage with real-time tiering, so a great promotion there to take advantage of, as well as free LTO6 or LTO7 media on our Scalar i500 and i6K tape libraries. And then, of course, our spiffs, which I just talked about, but up to $500 for bringing us on a customer meeting. And if you bring Veeam and Quantum into a customer meeting, we'll pay you up to $500. We'll pay you $500 for that meeting as well. So, Mark, do you want to?
Well, so I already made the point. So with Quantum, not only do we have the appliance, which can act as the gateway to all these tiers, but we also have all of these tiers. Definitely we can engage and be very comfortable having a cloud conversation or an archive conversation with your customers, wherever their interests are. So, feel comfortable and confident that we can actually probably provide the best solution to fit each customer's needs, really, really well. So, pretty chart.
And in addition to Quantum Alliance, quantum.com/archive is a great place to find more information, or feel free to reach out to us or your salesperson with any more questions, and we're happy to help. So I think we just have a couple more questions in Q&A. Mark, you address?
Yeah, sure. So John, I'll ask you. One is, will you provide slides? So how do we answer that question?
Yeah, so we will get the slide deck as well as the recording of this webinar up on Quantum Alliance by Monday or Tuesday of next week.
Okay. And then a couple of the other comments were related to erasure code technology. And I'm going to make one quick additional content comment here. There's all kinds of implementations of erasure code technology, and that came up when I mentioned our Lattice object storage platform. That's how it maintains data durability and can disperse files across multiple sites and protect against DR and things like that. The type of erasure code that our Lattice solution implements is called fountain erasure code, and it's really, and I believe it actually is the most efficient from a performance perspective erasure code out there, and that's why our Lattice platform is among the higher performing object storage containers. We may have some white papers and things like that. You should probably come to our site and look up object storage or Lattice or extended online. We've called it all those things. And I've actually Googled a lot and studied erasure code a bit just on what's out there in the public infrastructure out there. So there's a lot of data about erasure codes out there, but I do want to point out that we actually have a really powerful, from a performance perspective, implementation that makes our product really good where performance is needed. So I thought I'd add that. So go check out our website. I don't know that I can point you exactly to a place right here and now, but follow up with us and we'll get you the data. And I think that was it. I don't see.
There's another question. Can you use Article with a parallel file system?
Oh, I don't even see it.
We're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know? I'm not sure I understand the question, to be honest.
Yeah, I believe the answer to this is yes. I had talked to somebody about this. So yeah, Artico as the archive behind one of these other parallel file systems.
Oh, I see the question.
Possible. So, but the person asked if we can talk offline, and we will get somebody in touch with you to talk about that.
Yes. As a matter of fact, we do have a lot of HPC type of use cases, and when we have a family that extends from Artico as well. So, you know, Artico may be able to address your problem if we get more details about it. But then we have some additional products that just branch up from there, you know, and we serve all kinds of very high performance processing environments, and maybe we can solve that problem there. So,
yep.
As John said, follow up and we'll take care of it.
Yep, and I captured the person's name.
Okay, perfect.
So I will do that. All right. And then let's announce our 5 Starbucks winners. It's Mike Taylor, Stephen Heap, Kevin Riley, Paul Shade, and Howard Campbell. So congratulations to our winners. And like I said, we'll get this presentation and the recorded webcast up on Quantum Alliance by Monday or Tuesday. And we hope to see you for our next Coffee with Quantum. Everybody have a great weekend, and thanks to our presenters, Mark Pastor and Kira Maloney.
Very good. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.